Ooh, that's not good. So this vehicle clearly has a clunk, but no start condition. Now, I've seen this plenty of times before. We're going to go over 3 different areas to focus on. We're going to talk about the battery, we're going to talk about wiring, and of course the starter itself. There's one other area that we can pay attention to, but it's a lot less likely, so I'll just save it for the end. Now, since every time I turn the key on this, I can hear an audible clunk coming from inside of my engine compartment, I know that my starter is getting power. Just because the starter is getting power, is it getting the proper amount? The starter needs to have at least 12 volts of power leading down to it. If for some reason you don't have full 12 volts, you're going to find that the starter can't do its job. If the battery's old, it might show that it has 12 volts, but under draw or under load, it might actually drop down into the 11s or even down to 10 volts. If it's down to 10 volts, it's not getting enough power down to that starter. So you need to pay attention to the age of the battery as well. A quick test for the battery can simply be done either by using a load tester, which not everybody has, or you can try using a multimeter. So now while I'm looking at this, I can see that I have approximately 12.23 volts here. Now this is generally pretty good. Like I said, you want to be at approximately 12.4, but I have been trying to start this several times. This isn't too bad. Now what I need to do is have this on here. If I had a second person, I could ask them to crank the vehicle. It's going to make that clunking noise, of course, but I want to see how far this drops. The voltage dropped down to approximately 11.5 volts. Now this is common because it is under load. What I also noticed is as soon as I turned off key power, it jumped right back up to that 12.27. The battery voltage is a little low on this vehicle because I've attempted to crank this several times to get that clunking noise and eventually hopefully start it, and it just didn't happen. Now maybe you don't have a specified way of testing the battery. The next thing that you could do is of course try jump starting the vehicle. If it still makes that clunking noise, it's not the battery. So now we can start talking about our wiring. We're going to start up at the battery since that's where we're at. We're going to be checking for connection points, we want to check for damage, and we want to check for corrosion. One of the first things that I always like to do is take hold of the terminal ends up along the top of the battery and confirm that they're secure. If they move around, obviously there's going to be an issue. We'll take hold of the positive terminal here. I'm wiggling this. I can see that there's no movement. Negative terminal, we're checking them both. Once again, no movement. But while I'm up here, I do see that they have corrosion on each one of my terminals. Is this going to cause a no start condition? Probably not. But battery corrosion can actually cause a slight draw on the battery voltage itself. So if your battery's constantly drawing down, this could be an issue. Of course, we will have to clean that, but let's continue on with our inspection. Let's go ahead and follow some wiring here down through the engine compartment. Ooh, that's not good. The positive wire just broke right off of the starter. Now, since this was corroded to the point that it was ready to fall apart, clearly I wasn't getting enough voltage and amperage down to that starter to go ahead and turn over the engine, causing that clunk noise. Now, let's just go with the assumption that you don't see any corrosion or damage on your wiring harnesses. You could also quickly test to see if you have power and ground down at the starter using something as basic as a test light. For this, I'm going to take one end of my test light and I'm bringing it to a ground. And then on the other end, I'm going to the positive connector right here, and I do see that it's lighting up, which is what I'm looking for. After testing all that, the next thing that I would want to pay attention to would be the starter itself. What I would do is just take a hammer and punch, and I would lightly start tapping on the starter solenoid, and I would also tap on the body of the starter. While I'm doing this, I want to have somebody inside the passenger compartment attempting to start the vehicle. So I'll just make my way up here. Now the solenoid is the smaller area here. If that didn't work, the next thing I would do would make my way to the body here, as I mentioned. Now, the reason why I'm tapping in these areas is because inside of the starter, you're going to find that you have brushes. And if there's any miscellaneous debris due to wear, it could get bound up in some way. And this might just break it free. If this did happen to work for you, the vehicle started, that's great. But I wouldn't stop there. It's kind of really just a temporary fix because it could actually end up going bad on you again, and then you're stuck someplace again. What I would do is I would go to 1A Auto, I would order myself a brand new starter after I've confirmed everything else is good, and of course I would replace it. During the removal of my starter, I found that I had a couple issues with wiring. One of the first things that I found was on my large power wire, the connector itself was actually corroded to the point that it was ready to break. One quick wiggle, it snapped right off. That's going to be an issue that could cause this clunking noise. Aside from that, during the removal of my signal wire, the stud that's actually part of the starter snapped right off internally. I can see it right here. This is very bad. It could have been a weak connection inside that starter. Power wasn't making its way to where it needed to be. And one last thing that I noticed on the original starter in comparison to the new, we have the power wire that goes between our solenoid and the starter motor itself. Look at all the corrosion on this in comparison to the brand new starter. But there is one more thing that I want to talk to you about. How have you been doing your maintenance? Have you been hearing any odd noises coming from your engine and then one day it just stopped running? At this point, we're going to make sure the engine isn't seized. To easily test to see if the engine is seized, you want to find the front of the engine, which is where the belt system is going to be. You're looking for the crank pulley or the harmonic balancer. Once you found that, you want to find the bolt in the center, and we want to attempt to turn this clockwise. If you find that it does turn, that's a good sign. If it does not turn, more than likely the engine is seized, and of course that's going to be another issue.